Another four-letter word. From Hero is a Four-Letter Word by J.M. Frey. Funerals, Jennet decides, both literally and metaphorically, suck. Metaphorically in all the ways they talk about in entitled poems and empty hymns and useless novels about vast, open spaces and disillusioned young men with something to prove. Literally because when they lower her father's coffin into the cold, damp earth, it feels like she's about to be pulled down on top of it. It had only ever been the two of them, Jenn and David against the world, happiest pair that ever was, strong, defying all the stereotypes of men who can't care, can't nurture, can't mother. Father and daughter powerful together. And now, separated forever. Jennet clutches a slim ash tree, leans close to it, and does her best to breathe wet, chill cemetery air, to remain upright, to not pitch herself nose first into her dad's grave. She has no mother, no uncle, no brothers or sisters to hold her upright, help her stand firm. Only Mrs. MacDonald, the cook and housekeeper, hovers beside her elbow, but does not touch. They don't have a close enough relationship for that, but if Jenn was pressed, she'd have said that the woman was the closest thing to a female role model she'd grown up with. Her father hadn't believed in governesses. Too Victorian. When she's invited to speak about the deceased, Jenn just shakes her head, fingers digging into the bark. Mr. Coldwell, the only other servant and the man who was chauffeur, mechanic, valet and friend to her father, steps up instead. He pulls a folded card from his breast pocket, clearly anticipating that Jenn's grief would make her mute and the task would fall to him. That is the nice thing about Mr. Coldwell. He is so good at anticipating when he would be needed. Jennet listens with half an ear, the rain on the leaf mold and the canopy above them too much of a hindrance to her sorrow-soaked brain to catch all Mr. Coldwell's words. When he's done, he presses the card between Jenn's fingers. Mrs. MacDonald takes it, tucks it into her small black purse, and Jenn is absurdly grateful that it will be kept safe. She wants to read it, but she can't worry about keeping track of it just now. Then the priest is calling her forward, and she goes on shaking legs, the heels of her pump sinking into the wet grass. He presses a clump of soil into her hands, and she steps to the edge of the wound in the world and opens her fingers. It lands with a wet plop right about where her father's face would be. She stumbles back, horrified with the visual, and covers her own face with her soil-streaked hands. The rain is freezing, sharp fingers against the back of her neck. Mrs. MacDonald touches her shoulder, and that's it. That's all Jenn can take. Enough. She turns and flees back into the house, leaving mud and rainwater in her wake like fairy story breadcrumbs. She shuts herself up in the close quietness of her dad's ensuite shower stall. The poof still smells of his cologne body wash, fills her nose with the scent of warm, gripping hugs that she will never have again. And she crumples against the tiles and weeps, and weeps, and weeps. Despite the large house and the land surrounding it, Caterhaugh Estate isn't wealthy. Nor is it really an estate. Jennet and her dad were not part of the peerage, never mind that the people of nearby Selkirk call them lord and lady out of respect, and Jennet herself draws down only a modest stipend from the family trust. The house itself is 2 stories above ground and 1 below that comprises the pantry and kitchens with big dugout windows. She and her father had apartments on the upper part of the house at the front, and there are 2 guest rooms and a study at the back. The ground floor is home to the formal dining room, the informal breakfast room, a sitting room that her father had filled with cleverly hidden electronics like a television and a sound system, 2 servants' quarters occupied by Mrs. MacDonald and Mr. Coldwell when they aren't in the mood to head back to their homes in Selkirk, and their shared bathroom. The house was old enough and well cared for enough to qualify for heritage status with the government, but that would mean needing to put some cash into the restorations, and frankly, they just don't have the money. As the only surviving bloodkin to the Lord of Caterhaugh, Jennet is entailed the manor, the grounds, and 100 acres of farmland which has been rented to the same family for the last 3 generations. Jennet inherits very little money beyond the trust, the interest on which pays the salaries of Mr. Coldwell and Mrs. MacDonald, and for their consumables. The money from the farming tenants goes towards the upkeep of the house and Jennet's admittedly modest lifestyle. Jenn doesn't work, per se, but she does sit on the board of several of the local charities, art centers, and business associations. Included in the manor's grounds is a triangular plain crisscrossed with famous, so-called, fairy circles, and just enough forest to get lost in. The forest borders both the Yarrow and the Ettrick, inhabits the fork where the 2 tributaries come together and head off as one to the faraway North Sea. From the window seat of her apartment, Jennet can see a doe with her fawn grazing along the edge of the lawn, sticking close to the trees. Her father's grave is on the other side of the house, hidden behind the crumbling family chapel, and she is absurdly thankful that it isn't visible from her sitting-room window. She's fled here after a day full of long, painful discussion and even more heartbreaking choices. She watches the deer and clutches a cup of tea and does her best to empty her mind. But even Mother Nature, it seems, is determined to not let her hide away from the thought of children. The truth of it is this. Jennet can afford to remain at Caterhaugh, could probably live on the trust and the entail indefinitely, but the question has become, who will get it after? Who will Jennet name as her heir? A few decades ago, Caterhaugh was open to tourists, like the grand houses of the Historical Trust used to do in the old days. There once were parts of the house that were staged, but so few people came out to the manor that they had repurposed the spare room as Jennet's nursery and her dad's study when she'd been small. With no wee ones in the house and the building aging at a rate that is beginning to outpace the living's ability to keep up the repairs, perhaps it is time, Mr. Codwell floats as the three of them huddle over a pot of tea on the rough scallions table in the kitchen, to revisit the idea of turning the east wing into a bed and breakfast. They could hire a part-time maid from the village to take care of the bedrooms, Mrs. MacDonald could do the cooking, Mr. Coldwell could pick up visitors from the train station in the old Model T that he has meticulously refurbished, and Jennet could play hostess. The only downside is, of course, that Jennet isn't sure she could smile that much around strangers. She wouldn't mind it if she could just avoid that part of the house, but of course part of the draw is going to be getting to interact with the Lady Caterhaugh herself. To take brandy in the sitting room, tour the ornamental and kitchen gardens, perhaps go for a horseback ride around the boundaries of the forest. And, Mr. Coldwell says gently, we'd have to rent out your father's apartments. Jen's fingers go tight on her teacup and she bites her lip hard to keep back the instinctual no. It would make a lovely honeymoon suite, Mrs. MacDonald agrees, voice low and deferential. It's a conversation that has to be had, Jennet knows. But that doesn't mean any of them like having it. If we made it a little bit less like Daz, Jennet finishes. Mrs. MacDonald quaffs her tea in a single wincing gulp. Yes. She pours more for everyone, warming up what's left in their cups, and they drink in silence for a moment. Fresh coat of paint? Something lighter? Get the pipe smoke smell out and some nice landscapes on the walls. Maybe leave up the family portraits? No, Jennet says. I mean, the rest okay. But the portraits, I want them moved into my sitting room. I'll arrange for, Mr. Coldwell begins, but Jennet shakes her head. I'll do it. She lets go of her teacup and balls her fists against her eyes, pushing hard to keep the tears at bay. She's so damn sick of crying. It's my family. I don't want some workman I don't know to touch. No, I want to do it. Okay, dear, Mrs. MacDonald says, a gentle, dry hand cupping the back of Jennet's head. Okay, we'll help you. Over the course of the weekend, they remove all the paintings from the wall that surrounds Jennet's sitting room fireplace. They patch and paint it with a fresh coat of buttercream color that will offset the gilt frames of the portraits nicely. It's the longest wall in her apartments, the only one not interrupted by doors or windows. The sitting room itself is divided by decor into a library and study corner, the comfy visiting area around the fireplace, and a small private breakfast nook. The main entrance to the apartment is beside the stuffed bookshelves with the squashy reading chair, 2 tall windows to the right, the fireplace and its wingbacks to the left, the small mahogany dining set ahead, and, beyond that, the door to Jennet's bedroom and ensuite. Jenn lines the portraits up in order of age against the wall, trying to determine the best hanging arrangement. The first is an oil painting of a wide, barrel-shaped man with startlingly ginger hair. He is swathed in Selkirk plaid, an almost eye-bleedingly tight pattern of blue and red. He stands behind a solid-looking lady wife and a dour daughter of about 12, who looks remarkably like Jennet at that age. It's a large painting of the laird, master of Caterhaugh and family, and it is easily as tall as Jennet. Next to it is a painting in which the young woman, Margaret, is all grown. Jennet turns her attention to Margaret's husband, a puckish young man painted with vividly green eyes and a bit of a cheeky grin. He wears no plaid, only the trousers and jacket of a well-off young man in the late 15th century. He has one arm wrapped tight around Margaret's shoulders, possessive and nearly inappropriate for a formal portrait of the lady. But Margaret is leaning into his touch, clearly enamored. A small baby boy grins out of the canvas from a froth of white fabric and lace in her lap, and his father's hand cradles his head lovingly. There was another child in the painting at one point, Jennet knows, but then he was painted out. Her dad had told her it was a common practice of the day when a child died. She can see a darkish smear by the husband's hip, the place where two different shades of black don't quite match. Nobody knows what happened to the little boy, which means that he probably died young. She brushes her fingertips over the blotch where the boy's chubby cheeks would be, in apology for his short life, the grief of her father's passing welling momentarily against the hollow of her throat, and swallows hard. Clearly, this was a family that adored one another, and it breaks her heart a little more that the boy-child is missing. The surviving boy's name was Thomas, Jennet knows that, but the father's name she doesn't recall ever having learned. A quick peek at the back of the canvas is no help, it's been papered over by the framers. The next painting is Thomas with his own children, a brace of 4 boys and a young girl cuddling a strangled-looking spaniel. The children are dressed as adults, as they did in the day, down to the little powdered wigs. The second eldest boy features in another portrait, in a much more portable size than the family ones, with a young man they say was a great favorite of his among the townspeople. Here they are both about 20, hands around each other's waists in a congenial manner, and smiling conspiratorially. Whether the young man was a friend or a lover, no one can be sure, but Jenn's dad had always liked the idea of the 2 men finding contentment in one another. He would have, considering. After that is another 2 family portraits, one more with a child painted out, and then they give way to muted black and white tintypes, silvery daguerreotypes, sepia-faded photographs, and finally the color-muted family photo portraits from the 20th century. There are photographs here of every generation of Caterhaughs for as long as the medium has existed. The appalling legacy of children dying in their first decade marches on, and without realizing it, Jenn finds her hand splayed over her own slightly paunchy stomach by the time she reaches the end of the row. She has no siblings, but her father had a sister once. The very young woman is grinning out of a photo taken at some pleasure chalet or other. She looks so very much like Margaret Selkirk that they could be the same person, and Jennet, she's been told, strongly favors her late Aunt Jane. It takes 4 months of good hard scrubbing, painting and furniture rearranging, a visit to Edinburgh to meet with a website designer, several long days filling out paperwork and standing in government queues, but eventually the Caterhaugh Manor bed and breakfast is open for business. Everyone in Selkirk takes a tromp through the house, shakes the hand of Lady Caterhaugh, and takes a cup of coffee in the dining room the first Saturday, just for curiosity's sake. When her neighbors ask why Jenn decided to follow through with the plans, she says, "It's something to do," instead of, "I don't know if the living would last." The latter is the truth, but it's too honest for polite company. Their first customers, 3 days later, are an American couple come over for a research trip, delighted to be able to stay right where the fairy stories they're writing about originated. Within an hour, Jennet is sick to death of talking about imaginary history and what it all might mean, a headache forming at the crest of their brash, broad voices. She begs out of the conversation by making up a phone call to a friend she's meant to be making. Once she's ensconced in her apartments, curled in her squashy reading chair, she does indeed call one of her friends in Selkirk. "Jenny," Karen says, "I haven't heard from you since—" "Well, never mind that. What's up? Just want to chat?" "Yes, and sorry." "Never you mind. You needed your time, but oh, what you've missed." Jennet spends an hour hearing all about the toddler's favorite new words and the teenager's sky-high mobile phone bills. It feels normal, boring, and it helps Jenn find her center again. "Can't believe you have a teenager," Jenn sighs as Karen winds down. "I can't believe it either. Wasn't it just last week that we were teenagers?" Karen says, and somewhere in the background something makes a smashing sound. "Oh, for God's sake!" Karen bawls. "Matthew, that's it. I'm selling you to your Auntie Jennet." Jenn laughs. "I don't want him," she says when Karen comes back on the line. "Need an heir yet, don't you?" Karen asks, and the question is casual, but the real concern is there. "I don't want to talk about that," Jenn says softly. Okay, Jenn, I know. But it's been 5 months since your dad, and you're not being, well, with it all." "That's over. It's done," Jenn says. "I don't want to talk about that. It's too soon. I can't think about that, okay? And now I've got this damn bed and breakfast, all this work, the paperwork, the house is always noisy, and I just feel like I can't get any rest. Okay, Jenny, okay, Karen says. Never you mind then. Hey, come down to ours for dinner this week. I'd like that, Jenn says. Good, good. I'll text you one later. Another smash in the background. Heaven preserve you, Matthew Simmons Jr., she yells. I need to ring off. Sure you don't want to buy him? Even a trade? I'll take that handsome new gardener of yours, the one I saw wandering down by the woods. Never you mind. Gotta go. Karen hangs up before Jenn can tell her that she hasn't hired a new gardener. Jennet waves off the Americans as Mr. Coldwell drives them into Selkirk for their dinner reservations, then puts on her wellies and her good thick pea-coat. It's early in autumn yet, but it rained that morning, and the forest is always damp and chill after a storm, and a pallid frost has been laddering up her spine since the phone call, a sense of apprehension that she just can't shake out of her vertebrae. She tours the grounds first and doesn't see anything out of sorts with the ornamental garden or the kitchen patch. Mrs. MacDonald, when asked, suggests that the young man Karen saw lurking around the grounds might be the new maid Brandy's boyfriend, a young musician named Alex. Brandy says Alex hates nature, would never go wandering in the woods if he could help it, and has only ever been up to Caterhaugh to pick her up from work. Jenn remembers the sound of his motorbike, the voices by the back entrance, the glimpse of riding leather and dark hair sticking out of a helmet. No, he didn't seem the type to just take a walk through someone else's property to pass the time. Crossing the plain, Jennet avoids stepping on the milk-white scars in the earth that her predecessors had named fairy circles, not because she fears them or even really believes in them, but because it was just respectful. Habit. Her dad had always walked around them, so Jennet does too. So too would her heirs if she ever... God damn it! Stepping into Caterhaugh Woods is like stepping through a mirror, or at least it is what Jennet thinks Alice must have experienced, how she imagined it when she'd read Through the Looking-Glass. The air is suddenly chillier, the colors are a bit more muted, a bit bluer. The world is lined with silver and diamonds where a good hearty Scottish mist clings to the ground brush, and dew and moisture sparkle on the flat leaves. Her breath plumes between her lips, and a frisson of something else slides across her skin, tries to get up under her cuffs and collar. Her da had told her many nursery stories about this place, about what happened under its canopy in generations gone by, that Jennet genuinely doesn't know if the feeling of walking through the wall of magic is her own imagination, fed by the tales, or just the change in the microclimate. She stops where she always stops, where her father had always stopped, 3 steps in, on a small mound left by a rotting log, beside an oak tree that has to be at least as old as Caterhaugh Manor House. Perhaps its brothers hold up the beams of the roof above Jennet's head as she sleeps. She lays her right hand on the bark in the same place that a dozen generations of Caterhaugh residents have done, and that one palm-shaped patch is as smooth and as shiny as a well-oiled banister. She closes her eyes, leans against the tree, and tries not to think about how this is the first time she's been here since her da was put in the ground. The last person to touch this spot had been David Carter. Without thinking too much about it, without giving herself time and space to feel foolish, Jenn presses her forehead against the rough bark above the handprint. She kisses the smooth place in the bark between her own fingers. It smells of damp and wood and skin and salt, of her lavender hand cream and the bacon sarnie she'd had for lunch, of the rich tapestry of the forest and the father she'll never hear fairy stories from again. That's new, a voice with a thick burr rumbles somewhere far ahead of her. If the forest could have a voice, then this is what it would sound like, old and Scottish, almost to the point of being a stereotype, thick and dark, male, curious, complex and fizzy like raw ginger on the tongue. Jenn lingers on the tree for a moment more, refusing to have this moment cut short, refusing to allow her observer to make her feel foolish. Then she leans back and stands up straight and peers into the mists. When she has found the blotch of shadow that is different from the rest, she rests a hip against the oak tree. The pose mirrors the speaker's own cocky posture, a deliberate call-out. Jennet smiles calmly, thinly. "You must be my new gardener, then?" She folds her hands across her chest, waiting. "Must I?" The voice is rich and amused. "Well, that's what they're saying in Selkirk, I hear. Funny thing, I don't recall hiring you." "Nor would you," the voice agrees. "So what are you doing in my forest?" A light laugh like air through branches. "Your forest?" "My father left it to me," Jennet says. "Caterhaugh is mine." Oh, the echoes of time, the voice says, and his burr is blurry and wistful. Right. Whoever you are, I have a mobile with me. Come out, or I call 999. A repressed snort of laughter. But that is different. Seriously now, Jennet says, fishes the mobile phone from her coat pocket and lifts it demonstratively. The blue glow cuts through the gloom and lights on the figure just a few paces away. It is thin, slumped, hands shoved in the kangaroo pocket of a hoodie, and when it looks up from under the hood, green eyes glitter in the light. Oh, Maggie, how bold you've grown. It's Jennet. Who the hell are you? The figure sweeps a deep and ironic bow. Liam. Ma'am. Ms. Jennet corrects with a knee-jerk reflex, and that's still no answer to why you're skulking around in my woods. Liam stands to his full height, pulls back his hood, removes his hands from his pockets, and steps into a slanting shaft of late afternoon sunlight. Motes and pollen dance in the air between them, and his hair sparks gold and straw. Jennet lowers her mobile as he spreads his arms, palm up. Do you know who I am? He asks. No, Jennet says. He grins. Jennet presses the 9 button twice. The electronic beep is harsh and flat in a small, mist-battened clearing. Liam, no last name, laughs. I'm no threat to you, Mistress Caterhaugh, nor to your guests. I come for you only. Come for me? Jennet repeats, both eyebrows caterpilling towards her hairline. And you think that doesn't sound threatening? I live down the way, he says, gesturing vaguely behind him. I walk the woods often, more now that I've clapped eyes on you. I saw you at the funeral. Jennet sucks in a breath, hands suddenly shaking. Right. Okay, now you're sounding like a creeper, just so you're aware. I came upon it by accident, I swear, Liam says, hands now towards her, placating. And you look so sad. I was burying my father, Jennet snarls. Of course, Liam allows. He looks younger when his smile dissolves, his face relaxing into pity, the lines falling away. Far too young for a man who is now suddenly holding her free hand, a thumb running along the back, soothing and very obviously attempting to be seductive. Succeeding, if she's honest. Right, Jennet reminds herself. This is how missing persons reports begin. But there's something so entrancing about his touch, the look in his green eyes, something irresistible. His breath is sweet and cool against the back of her hand when he lifts it to his cheek, eyes closed as if the texture of her skin is the most exquisite silk. And in your bedroom window, such sorrow upon your face when you look into the woods, he adds. Right. No, never mind. The spell is frayed with a sharp slap of worried disgust. You're a stalker, Jenn says, and it's meant to be an accusation, but it comes out far more weak, like there's something different in his touch. Something calming, something nearly magical, only there is no such thing as magic. She reaches for the self-righteous fire she throws at all the men who think a woman of Jenn's age and marital status are easy prey, but finds it banked into a small coal of absent-minded worry. She's nothing to throw. That's wrong. A stalker, no. I am an admirer, and you must admit I am a polite one, Liam purrs. No obnoxious boomboxes or pebbles thrown at your window. Put away your mobile, Jennet. She swallows hard and pushes her mobile into the back pocket of her jeans unthinkingly. Then she wonders why she did it. She reaches for it again, perturbed that she did it as she was asked so quickly, so neatly, but is distracted when Liam's grip on her hand shifts. He slides them so that they are palm to palm, fingers folded over the backs of each other's knuckles, and he pumps her hand in a slow shake. Pleased to make your acquaintance, Lady Caterhaugh, he whispers. His eyes are gravity wells as deep and as appealing as Da's grave. Pleased to make yours, Liam, she replies, enchanted far too easily by his smooth manners. He raises her hand to his mouth, brushes a dry kiss along the back of it. Then, from somewhere behind him, he produces a flower. It is one of the late-blooming wild roses, 2 blossoms fully blown on a single stem. Jennet can't help it. The spell is broken. She throws back her head and guffaws. He stands there, roses upheld, looking equal parts surprised and hurt. Oh, your face, Jennet howls. Did you think that would work? It always has, he pouts. Do ladies no longer like roses? Have they fallen out of fashion? Do you hear yourself? Jennet laughs. You sound like a period drama. Liam drops her hand and turns away, obviously upset, and rubs his free palm on the thighs of his dark jeans. "Oh, come on," Jennet says, calming down. "Don't get your feathers in a ruffle. It's a very nice rose, and your manners are lovely, and I do appreciate you not throwing rocks at my windows." He turns back to face her, face twisted in a strange rictus of amusement and horror. "Ladies are not at all what they used to be," he says, definitive. "Nope," Jennet agrees, and thank the Lord for that. Liam runs a frustrated hand through his hair, the gold fluffs up like a dandelion down. "You are not making this easy, Jennet," he huffs. "What's meant to be easy?" Jenn counters. "Me?" "Oh, no," he says, eyes immediately round and apologetic. "I didn't mean it like that." "Tell me how you meant it then, and choose your words carefully." She pats her back pocket expressively. "How is a man enchanted with a woman meant to behave if not like this?" His arms spread in askance, the head of the roses bob as if to agree with his frustration. "Well, threatening the safety of a woman by behaving like a horrible creeper is right out of fashion nowadays," Jennet says, and she can't help the lilt of tease that slips into her voice at the end. "And what then?" Liam asks, receptive to her smile. His frustration is ebbing, replaced with interest in her explanation. "Most guys chat up women in the grocery store or in a bar," Jennet says, "somewhere public, you know. Sometimes they even call a girl or message them on the internet, send them cards, or knock on their doors. Anything but skulk around alone in the forest with roses and cheesy lines." Liam grins puckishly and dips another theatrical bow. "But it worked, didn't it?" Jenn snorts. "Only because I decided to listen to you instead of brain you with a branch, which I may yet regret." "Oh, no, you won't, Jennet," Liam vows, his eyebrows and the tilt of his chin serious. "I'll do nothing to make you regret giving me this chance." Jennet snorts again. "Who says I'm giving you any chance? Cocky?" He holds out the roses. "Please?" Jennet reaches out and plucks the flowers from his hand. A thorn bites into her thumb and it feels good, feels real, so she lets it stay there. She buries her nose in the topmost blossom, breathes in the fresh air, good sunlight, clean soil, crisp water, life. His smile doubles, not in size, but in brightness. "Will you allow me to escort you home, Miss Carter?" He crooks his elbow. "No," she says. "You're still a strange man who's been staring in my bedroom window. I should report you to the police." "But you won't," he hazards, more hope in his voice than she thinks he knows. "I should, but you won't." Jennet twists her mouth in disapproval. "You're a forceful fellow and too young for me. Go home, Liam, and forget your stupid crush, and I'll forget to report a trespasser on my property." Liam bites his bottom lip enticingly. "Or you could meet me here again tomorrow and we could talk again." "That's not happening," Jennet says, grinning as she waves the rose at him, "but good try. If I see you in these woods again, I will be calling the police. Good day, Liam." "Good day, Miss Carter," he replies, and turns back into the shadows, and vanishes. "How much time do we have?" Liam asks as he pops out from around a fir tree. "Jesus!" Jennet yelps, hands pulled close to her breast like a Victorian heroine. Liam laughs and bows a little hello and waits with hands folded behind his back for her to swallow her heart. "Time until what, you lunatic?" "Until the police arrive," Liam asks, as if this is the most obvious answer in the world. "You said you'd called them, and you must have seen me out by the forks, or you wouldn't have come down to the woods. So, how long until they arrive?" "Why do you want to know?" "So I know how much time to woo you I have left," Liam replies. His mouth, his plush-bottom lip is serious, but his emerald eyes spark with mischief. "If it isn't long, I shall have to forego the longer poem for a sonnet. They're not as good, but they're quick." "Oh, shut up," Jennet says, pulling her shawl around her shoulders. She hadn't thought to put on her pea-coat this time, too peeved at having caught a glimpse of Liam from her library chair as she was going over the accounts for the first week of the B&B. She had just stormed out, intent on slicing into him with the sharp edge of her tongue. "I haven't called them." "Oh, Miss Carter, you do care," he crows. "I don't. I just don't think it's fair for an obviously bright young man to get nicked for something that is, and I'm really giving you the benefit of the doubt here, a harmless misunderstanding. Now, don't get it into your head that I condone stalking because pestering and street harassment are very real crimes, but you seem to be under the illusion that this is allowable, and it's absolutely 100% not. So, you've been told. I've made it perfectly clear. Do not wander around my woods alone, staring through my windows again. Shove off. I don't mean to be making you uncomfortable, Jennet, he says, and his regret does seem genuine. I'm not stalking. I just like looking at you. Jennet throws up her hands and sighs loud and long. Which is the exact definition of stalking? So here it is, my last mercy. She reaches out and flicks his forehead hard with her fingertip, leaving behind a small red mark. Are you listening? Next time, I will call the police. Next time, she does call the police, but they never find Liam. Not even any footprints, they say, none that are recent enough to have been imprinted on the ground less than an hour prior. The fourth time, he walks up to her in the supermarket, while she's trying to decide between 2 brands of butter, and slips a bottle of red wine into her hand cart. There now, he says softly, a dark purr beside her ear. Is this a more appropriate way to chat up a woman? Much, Jennet says, but doesn't give him the satisfaction of turning to face him. She continues to contemplate her butter. Silence. Liam rocks on his heels and Jenn reads labels. Well, what happens next? Liam asks, and his voice holds a note of petulant whine. Oh, you're really bad at this, Jennet says, and puts one of the tubs back onto the chilled shelf. She places the butter in her basket, pats his shoulder consolingly, and wanders down the aisle. Thanks for the wine. Good choice. She leaves him standing there, mouth hanging open. Jennet, he calls, scrambling across the slick tile floors after her. Really, please, what must I do to catch your attention? You could ask for it, Jennet suggests, now deeply engrossed in picking a brand of yogurt. Liam gulps for a few minutes, and Jennet is happy to realize that it's the first time she's giggled since her father died. The realization dampens the glee immediately, but she forces the smile to remain. She can't be miserable forever, and despite the rocky, slightly illegal start, Liam is endearing, cute, perhaps too young, but earnest, and right now, Jenn needs to feel beautiful, feel wanted. And it's very easy to call the police if he continues to overstep. Yes, Liam? She asks, choosing a low-fat Greek yogurt and popping it in beside the red wine. Would you like to go on a date with me? He mutters. Yes, Liam, she says. Now Jennet turns her full attention to him and graces him with one of her warmest smiles. He seems to grow taller, to unfurl under her gaze, his own puckish grin sliding back across his mouth. I think I would like that. Let me pay for these, and then why don't we go to the cafe down the main road? I would like that very much, Ms. Carter, Liam replies with another endearingly formal head tip, and this time when he holds out a crooked elbow, Jenn takes it. Months pass. Nearly a year since her father died, and Jennet wouldn't have thought this time last year that she would be smiling by now, laughing, flirting, happy. And Liam does make her happy. The thing is, Jennet knows this is all silly and doesn't much mind. She tells Karen that she's been seeing someone and that he is far more serious about it than her, and her friend yells, "Finally!" and pours them both another glass of wine and turns off the telly and adds, "So details!" None really, Jennet says. They are taking it slow, oh, so slow, because Jennet still hurts behind the smiles, because she feels guilty for finding joy when her da is dead and in the ground. But Liam is kind and clever and quick. He moves like a ballet dancer and smiles like the sun, and he is everything that grief-damp and sorrow-grey Jennet has feared she would never feel again. She is a full decade his senior, and yet he makes her giggle and blush. And a few days after she's told Karen all, when Liam brushes a sweet kiss across her cheek and asks her to meet him in the woods tomorrow for a walk, she turns crimson and agrees. So here she is, being honest to goodness wooed as she walks in the woods. I like it when you visit me here, Liam says, guiding her over a split rock in the path. It feels like our secret. Not much of a secret, Jennet says. My family's been meeting lovers in the woods for centuries. She realizes what she's just said, what she's just insinuated, and covers her face with her hands, positive her blush is phosphorescent. Liam laughs at her discomfort and pretends he didn't hear it in a gentlemanly manner. Oh, how those robust, virile Caterhaugh men loved their women. So many children they had, and so many little heirs running about. But the families got smaller and smaller. The men loved their women just the same, though. True, Jennet allows, still mortified, but unwilling to let her male ancestors have all the bragging rights, and the women their men. Look, here, Liam says, leading them to a gentle stop beside a lump of weed and bracken, about twice as wide as his own shoulders. Do you know what this is? Dead ivy? Jennet answers. Liam grins and crouches down, yanking on the brown vines until a small circle of grey stone is revealed. Oh, a well, Jenn says, kneeling onto the moist leaf mold to peer down it, hands braced on the ground rather than the rim in case it's unstable. The well from which Tam Lin was reborn. Jennet laughs. Oh, no, you know the song too. Liam laughs with her, and the tales, but it's not a tale, Jennet. It's true. 'Twas your own ancestor Margaret clung to Tam Lin as the fairy queen transformed him into a lion and an adder and a rod of red-hot iron. She flung her lover into the well, and he became a man again, reborn in the waters of a woman. They cleaved to one another their whole lives forever. Jennet rolls her eyes, which is, you have to admit, the prettiest way to talk about what was probably a roadside tryst. A length of red-hot iron, the waters of a woman? Sounds a lot like shagging to me. Why, Jennet, Liam says, voice pitched to mimic a particularly offended maiden aunt, and slides down to sit beside her, one of his thighs pressed along her hip. Your mind is positively in the gutter today. Was there something you wanted to proposition? My mind is in the gutter? We could take a role here, like the heroes of the great tales. Make love in nature, declare ourselves under the stars, all that romantic nonsense. She is tempted. God, is she tempted. It's been 2 years since her last serious boyfriend, and there was only so much batteries and fingers could do. But she has no condom, and Liam is already dangerously infatuated. What would a 20-year-old man allowed to have sex with an older woman think? She lets him put his hand on her thigh, fingernails scratching the denim puckering around her knees. Here is the moment of truth. Does she say yes? Or no? Or later? What is a hero, really? Jenn muses, instead of answering herself. The coward's way out, but she needs to think. Not if she'll sleep with Liam. She's decided she will weeks back. But if she will sleep with Liam right now. Right here. And if she does, will she tell him about that? Before, or after, or not at all? How do you mean? He asks, palms sliding towards her inseam. She doesn't stop it. Jenn smiles and leans into his arm, parting her legs a little further, inviting him to wander northward. Nothing wrong with some harmless flirting. Was Margaret the hero because she rescued Tam Lin? She asks. She held on and was granted marriage with Tam for her courage, even though he told her how to do it all, how to win. That's how the other stories go, Liam allows, accepting the invitation of her spread thighs. Rapunzel tells the prince how to defeat the witch, the princess on the glass hill rolls apples down to the farmer boy, the captive chooses their rescuer and eventual husband, and tells them how to win. It's less the challenge for the valiant knight that makes him the hero than it is the woman consciously choosing her mate. So what, their heroism is empty because the princess has already decided? Oh, that one looks humble and kind. He'll make a good king, and he won't beat me. I'll pick him to marry him, but I have to make him think he's winning of his own cunning and strength. Some sort of centuries-old mind games that the Grimms and Perrault never caught on to? Liam grins. Tell me how it is any different now. Men ask to wed a woman after dating them, after spending months or years proving their worth as a husband, as a father, and the woman is the one with the veto power. She says yes or no. Jenn can't help but echo his grin. You make it sound like a meat market. That's not what it's like. Besides, sometimes the woman asks the man. Sometimes there is no woman, or no man. Sometimes, like my dad, they just don't want to get married. I am generalizing, Liam allows, but you know what I mean. One person does valiant things to prove their worth, even if those valiant things are just taking out the trash and doing the dishes, and the other one decides if they get to keep them or not. You're still missing the point, Jenn says. It's a marriage, not a property contract. People choose to stay together not because one person wants and the other one consents to being wanted. They stay together because they like each other. They want to stay in each other's company, make each other happy, make them smile, comfort them when they're hurt, and take care of them when they're sad and sick. The other person increases their happiness when they're around, when the other person does something nice for them, when they do something nice for their partner. They both want, and they both consent. Liam leans forward. Well said, Jennet of Caterhaugh. His face is so close to hers, his breath a warm puff against her lips that tastes of mint and the bottle of cider they've been passing back and forth along the walk. Will you let me make you happy? Sure, Jenn allows. A single kiss can't hurt. He leans forward just far enough that their mouths touch. Then he giggles, lips vibrating against hers in a thrilling, delicious sensation that makes heat slide down her spine. See, he asks, flesh to flesh, the words smeared against her skin. One asks, one consents. Before she can answer, he pushes that clever tongue between her lips, and Jenn opens for him, opens her arms, her mouth, allows herself to feel good, to feel for herself, for the first time since her father had passed. Liam kisses the scar on her stomach over and over and over again, and produces a condom from the kangaroo pocket of his hoodie. I consent, Jenn murmurs amid the late autumn roses. And Jennet allows herself to remember that she is a human being who deserves good things, and Liam is more than happy to help her get there. Jennet is more relaxed than she's been in probably a decade. She's just had about 3 spectacular orgasms on the forest floor, a hot bubble bath in her ensuite, and there are no people staying over at the B&B, so she's able to have dinner alone. Now she's reading in her squashy chair, a fire crackling in the grate, and really, all is well with the world. Somewhere out there, her lover is at home, probably doing the same. He could be doing it here, but he hadn't asked. He just wiped his chin and handed her a bouquet of late-blooming roses fresh picked from the bush beside them, smiled his cheeky, twinkly smile, and sauntered back towards the little house he'd told her about. He's never invited her back, either, but Jenn likes to imagine it as an enchanted cottage, small and wood and covered with a carpet of ivy so thick that it would be invisible to all but those who know where and how to look. Romantic nonsense. She's just turning a page when a flash of blonde hair and green eyes catches her attention. At first she thinks Liam has come to visit, snuck into the house somehow to continue what they started, and she turns with a smile and a tingle on both sets of lips. But when she looks at him, she realizes it's not Liam at all. It's just the painting of Margaret and her husband. She's still not used to having the portraits in her room. She smiles at Margaret and her man, and is about to resume reading when something about the portrait arrests her attention. Now that she's really considering him, she can see that Margaret's husband looks an awful lot like Liam. She sets aside her book and goes over to the painting, tracing the curve of his waistcoat with her fingers. The man was painted nearly life-sized, and up close the detail is as remarkable as the resemblance. Well, it's a small county, and people have been intermarrying for years. It's entirely possible that Margaret's husband might resemble Jennet's new lover. She closes her eyes and compares Liam to the late Mr. Selkirk, or whatever his actual family name was, and is amazed to understand that they are not only similar, but to her memory they are damn near identical. Creepy. A shiver crawls over her shoulders, and Jenn turns to fetch her shawl from the warming rack by the fire. As she twirls it over her shoulders, another flash of emerald catches in the corner of her eye. She turns to the small, hand-sized picture of the 2 men, the ones her dad called lovers. There, again, is a young man who looks so very much like Liam that he could have sat for that portrait. No, this is silly. This is just family resemblance, like Margaret Selkirk and Auntie Jane Carter and Jennet. Jenn clutches the shawl close around her arms, fingernails digging into the scratchy wool, and takes a step back. And then another, all the way to the wall between the windows, and narrows her gaze, lets it slide across the wall of family, really looking for the first time. There, in the first photograph, a 20-something young man in full formal dining suit, light hair and eyes, and a cheeky smile. He is slightly apart from the family, perhaps an uncle or a brother-in-law, but one of the daughters is looking at him out the corner of her eye, and she is just the right age to be besotted. There, again, in a mid-century Polaroid, maybe the 60s, judging by the hairstyles, here is the green-eyed blonde man holding up a stubby brown bottle of beer and grinning out at the antics happening on the lock. Under his face it says Cousin Lynn in someone's blue, feminine penmanship. They're in another black suit among the military uniforms of the brothers Carter as they take one last family shot before half of them are sacrificed to the First World War. There, whispering with a young man in the back of a ballroom. And there, again, in the early 90s, Auntie Jane sitting on his knee, face half obscured by the glass of wine in her hand. And all of them, every single face, is Liam. Liam has no mobile phone. He's always just shown up or met Jenn at an agreed-upon time and place. It's the middle of the night. There's no way he'll be back in the woods, but Jenn puts on her boots and a turtleneck and her pea coat anyway, clutches close a torch, and plunges into the woods. "Liam!" she calls. "Liam!" She turns in circles, doing her best to follow the path back to the well. She'd know it in daylight, have no problems at all. She was bloody near born in these woods, played in them all her childhood, but now they are close and cold and creepy. Her torchlight cuts harsh streaks across the gloom, startling deer and foxes and ravens from their nest. The birds protest loudly. "Liam!" "Here, sweeting," a voice like black honey says, and Jennet turns into an embrace that is suddenly right where she needs it to be, which is terrifying in its own way. "What's the fuss?" "The paintings," she pants. "Oh God, the pictures." "Ah," is all Liam says, and the way he says it means that he understands the rest. Jennet jerks back, trying to peer up at his expression in the dark, but unless she wants to blind him with her torch, she can't make it out. A scream is building behind her larynx, confusion and terror behind her eyes, but Jennet is Lady of Caterhaugh and master of her own body. She swallows heavily. "Come back to the house," is all Jennet says. It's rather more order than a request. "We need to talk." Liam takes her shoulders in his hands and bends down so their faces are a breath apart. "Be very certain, Jennet of Caterhaugh, that inviting me into your home is what you really mean to do." "I'm not scared of you," Jenn says. He searches her gaze, her face, eyes on her mouth, the lopsided dimple that only appears on her left side, as if testing the mettle of her resolve. He nods slowly, meaningfully, just once. When they reach Jenn's apartments, she heads straight for the ensuite, plugs the tub, and opens the taps. Liam is filthy and shivering. He hasn't washed since their tumble by the well, and he stinks of rot and stale sex. They make love again in the bath. In the bubbles, it is slow and desperate, each clinging to the other, reaffirming that they are real, human, here. Then she swaddles them both in thick terry cloth robes fetched from the B&B linen cupboard and presses a snifter of brandy from her dad's private collection into his hand. She swirls her own, admiring the heady scent as Liam stands silent and solemn before the wall of Caterhaughs. Jenn stands behind his shoulder, studying his face. Their hair leaves small wet spots on the carpet. "Tell me I'm crazy," she says. Liam turns to face her. "I can't." "They're all you." "Yes." "You're fucking with me." He sets the snifter down on the mantelpiece and cups her face in his hands. "My dearest Jennet, why would I lie to you about this, the most important secret the Caterhaughs hold? I am the gift that one generation leaves to another." "And did you sleep with all of them?" She spits, her confusion twisting into hurt and fury. "I mean, I thought I was special." You are mine now, and that makes you special to me." "But these others, her and him and Aunt Jane, did you love them?" Liam smiles sadly, then pries the brandy from her hands and sets it beside his own. "Are you jealous, my sweeting? I love you now." "This is impossible," Jennet protests. "What are you?" "Yours." He kisses the tip of her nose sweetly, and she tries to fight off the way it makes the heat pool low in her belly, desire crackle along her flesh. "And all the children of Caterhaugh, however few of you there may be. Oh, I begged your father to take a wife." "My dad was gay," Jenn says. "And yet there is you," her lover replies, a grin splitting his face. "He was gay, not a dead fish," Jenn counters. "He wanted to be a father. He could. It is the 21st century. "That it is," Liam agrees, his words amiable, his tone light, but something in his eyes grows dull and the sparkle ebbs for a moment. Do you have another father, then? Dad had a lover, Jenn begins, but then stops herself. I never met him. They were together before me, and after... She trails off and shrugs. They'd meet up now again, out this way, but I never knew him. Eventually David's desire to be a father overrode all other loves, Liam says gravely. I pushed too hard. Jenn snaps her gaze up to his face. How did you know my father's name? The Lord of Caterhaugh, he mocks. Everyone knew him, or of him, at least. Jenn groans. Ugh, that old acorn, really? So you do know the gossip. The glimmer returns to Liam's eyes. Jenn rolls her own. Liam presses her close against his chest, his green gaze intent as he studies her face, sweeping down to take in the roses in her cheeks, the red blush on her chest. The song, the fairy tale, it's famous. Everyone knows how my story began. But the rest of it? What do the old ditties in town say about father being the last heir of Margaret and Tam Lin? Well, that would actually make you the last heir now, wouldn't it? Liam says. Jenn pauses, startled by the realization that he is correct. She's never thought about it like that before. The superstitious old folks always talk of boys when they make mention of fey lovers in the woods, of traditions and cutting the corners off houses to leave room for fairy paths, of bowls and milk and honey-soaked bread left out for the kind folk, or at least to bribe them to remain kind. I suppose, Jenn allows. It is the 21st century after all, Liam mocks. Jenn scowls. Not that it matters, they're just stories. But stories hold a truth. And what about you, my darling Jennet? Am I the only man in your life? In your bed? Jenn jerks out of his grip. How can you ask that? I've been dating you, only you. Liam smiles. I have not asked you for monogamy. It is the 21st century. Well, I'm not Polly, Jenn says. So then it is up to me. Liam replies darkly and reaches for her again, burying his nose in the damp strands of her hair. I am sure I can get you with child. I'm sure you can't, Jenn says, grabbing his small tender hairs at the back of his neck and tugging hard, forcing him to meet her eyes. And I think you need to slow the hell down. We've just established that you're not fucking human. You're what, a fairy? Fey touched, please, he corrects with a mew of distaste. I was not born so cruel. Fey touched, whatever that means, so I think you can hold the hell up on the kids' talk. Liam grinds his hips forward, and Jenn wouldn't be human if she didn't admit that it got her a little hot under the collar. Why? You want me, and it's very easy to do. Your father managed an heir, surely you could. It's not that easy, Jennet deflects. She presses her lips to his neck, tasting sweat and bath soap and well water. Sure it is, Liam says with a grin. Just lie back and think of Caterhaugh. Shut up, Liam, Jenn says and reaches down to tug on the belt of his robe, spreading the halves and pressing into the warmth between them. Just can the kids talk, okay? It's not erotic. Liam inhales heavily through his nose, animalistic, strong, so damn hot, but then he ruins it by biting into her lobe and saying, But don't you want my children, Jennet? I will fill you with my seed, I will fuck a baby into you, and our son will be beautiful. Jenn shoves him back so hard, so full of disgust, that he actually ricochets off one of the wingback chairs. It falls over, whacking into the wall, and one of the brandy snifters topples, smashing on the hearth and spilling alcohol into the fire. It flares and crackles, spitting indignantly, as Jenn shoves her hands into her robe pockets to keep from putting Liam's stupid, insensitive head through the goddamn wall. Jenn, what have I... Don't you dare try to override my desires with your own. Don't you dare try to change my mind when I have already told you what I do and do not want. You don't know me better than me. Jennet, I'm not a child. You can talk around to it. Please, Jennet, Liam says, scrambling to get upright, wincing as he jostles his hard-on when he gets his rump back under him. I didn't mean it like that. Only that I can't have kids, Jennet fumes, refusing to allow him to continue. I'm all messed up inside, okay? Happy now, Mr. Sticks his nose where it doesn't belong? Bloody hell! Liam goes a new and interesting shade of pale and pulls himself to his feet. They aren't steady, and he grips the mantelpiece, avoiding the broken glass and gulping down the remains of the brandy from the second snifter. Sorry, Jenn whispers after he manages to get a hold himself. We kept it pretty quiet, but there will be no heir of Caterhaugh. None, Liam asks, and his voice is rough and raw and small. None at all. Not of my blood, Jennet says. I could adopt. Maybe I should adopt. Such a big house. I'm sure there's a child in care who would love it. Caterhaugh does need an heir. But the heir of Caterhaugh must be of your lineage, Liam blurts, spinning around to face her. He reels, knocks the second snifter, and it smashes into its brethren, small shards of glass flying up and scoring Liam's shins. He doesn't seem to notice. His face is suddenly flushing, even though his lips remain ghost white. He catches himself and bites down hard on the inside of his own cheek. Jennet laughs. Don't tell me you actually believe all that fairy tale nonsense. Liam says nothing. He stares down into the fire, eyes distant and dim, and for a while Jennet lets him. What's wrong? He finally asks. Jenn hates this conversation. She's had it over and over and over with well-meaning busybodies who do not understand what it means to have to choose between a hypothetical future and a devastating present. She's not in the mood to have it again, so she flops down into the remaining wingback chair and crosses her arms petulantly. Nothing now. But if nothing's wrong, then why can't you have children? Liam thunders. Jenn scoffs, unaffected by his display of man-child rage. Leaving aside the fact that you're making one hell of an assumption about whether I even want children, and a second bloody huge assumption about how a woman is broken or wrong or useless because the mechanism in her body has malfunctioned, it was either my uterus or my life, okay? Jesus! Liam turns large, wet eyes to her. You nearly died? Yes, Jenn bites out. Complications from polycystic ovarian syndrome. What does that mean? He crouches down, lays his hands on her knees as if to console her, but is patronizing, and she hates it when someone tries to make her feel like a small child who just needs to have things explained to her better, and then she'd understand, then she'd care. Only she doesn't care, and she doesn't need to have it explained better, and she sure as fuck doesn't need anyone to make her feel guilty about saving her own life. So she sneers and says, they took it all out. Everything. Everything? Liam asks, horrified. Don't judge me, she spits. This isn't your choice to make, you know. It's my body. I decide what is and is not injected into it, how it's cut up, what's taken out, or what's put in. God, you're just like the doctors. All those old white guys telling me they know what's best for me, making choices about my reproductive organs as if I was just a baby machine that is broken down and not a human being who is consciously and contentiously chosen. Liam cries so prettily. Jennet has to give him that. But did they have to remove everything? No, Jennet says, but I told them to anyway. To keep it from coming back. So you made them cut out your... Not that it's any of your business, but yes. I didn't know. David never... Why would my father tell you? Jenn kicks his stomach gently, getting him to back up, and he stands. She regards Liam carefully through the lens of this new information. Liam shifts uncomfortably under her gaze, then stills himself and meets it. It doesn't matter now, Liam whispers. They are silent again for a long time, neither of them willing to break their staring contest first. You can't honestly tell me it bothers you, Jenn finally says. That you can't have children? It does. Why? Jenn spits. It was my uterus. It has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with me, Liam roars. And then he is gone, the door to her sitting room crashing against the wall, making the books on her shelf shiver with the force. He is a shadow streaking through the night when she rushes to the window, swallowed by the trees, lost to the darkness and the woods. Jennet sits on her little window seat and shakes, one hand pressed against her mouth, the other cupping the wide, grinning scar that smiles on her stomach. Jennet doesn't see Liam for a week, and that makes her viciously pleased. When Curate and her husband and kids come over for dinner, Jenn steadfastly does not allow herself to look at little Maddie in wonder. When Karen asks what happened to her beau, Jenn tells an extremely edited version of the truth, and the three adults drink to being rid of douchebags. When the meal is done, the Simmons go home, and the manor is devoid of servants and guests, and Jenn feels, horrifically, suddenly, alone. A bottle of wine and then some sloshing around her system, Jenn puts on her pea coat and shawl and grabs a candle. The torch feels too harsh. When she is outside, she walks to the plane, lights the candle, and sticks it into the grass by her knee, and sits in the middle of a fairy ring. She's not surprised in the least when Liam sits down across from her after a few moments, clad once more in a green hoodie and black, skinny jeans, even though Jenn knows for a fact that he left them behind on her bathroom floor. "How does it affect you?" she asks with no preamble. "I missed you." He reaches for her hand and she pulls it back, hides the pair of them in her pockets. "How?" "Do you know the worst part about the stories?" Liam asks. "It's the magic, the things that the Fae can do. They're not sweet, they don't laugh like bells or have delicate dragonfly wings or any of that. They are dark. They are cruel. Eyes of wood and a heart of stone," Liam says, touching his own chest. "That's what the Fairy Queen threatened." He rubs with the heel of his hand against his sternum, as if to make sure that his heart is still there, still warm, still beating. He was human. He was employed in collecting heather, and he fell asleep in a fairy circle. This one. Jenn resists the recoiling urge to stand and jump out of it, but Liam, Tam Lin, is here with her, and she accepted his roses. She feels safe here. When he reaches for her again, places his free hand on her knee, she doesn't push him away. He begged her not to, told the queen who had captured him, forced him into her entourage in bed, raped him. He begged her not to take that too, to blind and murder him. And the queen didn't, because it was the human soul in his eyes that she loved so well, and his human heart that could swell and break, that she loved to hold in her hands. "She hurt him," Jenn says, voice an odd hush, loath to break into Liam's story to startle him away from it, but she has to ask. Liam blinks slowly, inner gaze still on that faraway court, still wandering the fairy lands. "The good people, we call them. The kind folk. But it's not a name, it's an invocation, it's a plea. Be good to us, we beg, because the Fae, they aren't good. They're capricious. What is a joke to them is crippling, maiming, murder to us. What they call lovemaking, we call rape. They forget that we're so very breakable. And they love to see pain. Hurt reflected back in a lover's eyes, a heart beating too fast, adrenaline, sweat, and cold fear. Wooden eyes can't cry. A stone heart can't bleed." And now he is starting to panic, breaths becoming gulpy and shallow, desperate, fingers twisting into his hoodie. "Liam," Jenn says softly, reaching out to touch his shoulder. He jumps, blinking hard, and makes a sound like an aborted sob. "I'm fine," he lies, after he has caught his breath again. Jenn lets the falsehood hang heavy in the air. "In the stories, Margaret saved Tam Lin." "That she did," Liam agrees, "and she loved him well. They realized after a time, we realized, that Maggie was aging and I was not. The Fairy Queen had accepted that Tam Lin would not be her tithe that year and released me to wed my rescuer, but she did not let me go." "I don't understand." "There was a child in that painting," Liam whispers, his voice crackling over the grief. "The art historian said so," Jennet agreed. "A little boy." "Rab," Liam says. "He was 7 years old. He died on All Hallows' Eve." Understanding strikes swift and cold. "Dear God." "Yes. I thought that was the Fae's revenge for having humiliated their queen, to take my firstborn son, but then our third child, a girl, the queen took her too, in her 7th year. So Margaret bore no more children. Thomas grew up, and I did not grow older. So on the next tithing I threw myself on the mercy of the queen, begged her to take me instead of him, for he was 21 then, with a wife and a babe of his own, and she laughed and took my grandson instead. And she said to me, 'Tam Lin, I will take all of your children for all of time, or I will take the world. I will stop the tithe, and hell will be upon this earth. Which would you prefer?' And so I... What else could I do, Jennet? What else could I do? My blood, my children, for as long as there are children, or me, and then everyone else." "What do you mean your children?" Jennet asks. "It's been centuries. Surely she can't still be after..." Us? Me? Liam takes her hands and kisses each of the palms. The closer to my blood, the better, Tamlin explains. When it grows too thin, I rejoin the family. I am a new lover, a husband, a cousin come a-courting. All Hallows Eve is next week, Jennet. You see my desperation. You fuck your own descendants and get them pregnant on purpose? Jenn asks, aghast. She tries to pull her hands back and he doesn't let go. The candle sputters. They enjoyed it, every one, Liam says with a shrug. You've had no complaints. Fury makes her suddenly strong. Jenn wrenches a hand free and slaps him hard across the face. Liam just grins as his lip splits and dribbles blood. Ah, there's my Maggie. Jenn stands, stalks out of the circle and around it, too furious to leave, too upset to sit still. And then what? You just let them die? The Fairy Queen demands her tithes. Every 7 years they must send a soul to hell, and about a third of the time she remembers that I owe her mine. The time between tithes is getting longer. I always pray that one day she'll forget, but I know she never will. And meantime, you give her your sons. Sometimes the daughters, Liam says, light and unconcerned, perhaps slightly confused by her fury. You vile, disgusting, unbelievable monster, Jenn snarls. They all volunteered, they all consented, Liam protests, each and every one of them, out of love, if not for me, then for their family. Love, Jenn screeches. What does a 7-year-old know of love and sacrifice? That is not informed consent. They knew the songs, the stories, they knew that one day they would— Oh my God, Jenn hisses, and her knees dump her into the edge of the circle with such force that she hears a crack. She falls onto her side, too desolate to sit up. Oh my God. Da. There's a long silence, and then Liam crawls across the grass and buries his fingers tenderly in Jen's hair, massaging gently across her scalp. He did it for love of you, Jennet Carter. He wanted to save the world from hell, and he consented. He saved me. Liam finally chokes. He took my place. It was a heart attack, Jenn protests. It was a tithe. He was a hero. It's not heroism, Jenn protests. It's suicide. Jennet wrenches away from his touch, sitting up, turning around and shoving his shoulders hard enough that he slams back on the ground. His green eyes are wide and, for the first time, filled with fear. It could have been you. It should have been you, you revolting coward. Fire snaps in that emerald gaze, burning away the surprise, and he kneels up and shoves her back. And then who, Jennet Carter of Caterhaugh? After the Fairy Queen has had her Tamlin, then who would she come for after? My descendants? There's only you left. And then who? 7 years after that? Who would she pick? The nearest human? Perhaps your Karen? She does so love her walks in the woods. Jennet claps her hands over her ears. Stop. Or little Maddie? Shut up. Or perhaps some of your tourists, or your Mrs. MacDonald. Shut up! I will not, because you will understand me, Jennet Carter. No! He grabs her wrists and yanks her hands down, trapping them in one hand. The other he digs into the hair behind her ear and holds her head still so she can't look away, can't break his gaze. When my Maggie saved me from the tithing, the Fairy Queen vowed her revenge, and she is old, and she is dark, and she has not forgotten. The Fairy Queen will never give hell one of her fae. She will empty the world of humanity before she gives up her kin, and because I cannot bear to see the world destroyed, I rip out my own heart and give it in their place. I give her children of my blood, yes, because they are raised to know what I will ask of them, and because I can hold them here. He flings away her hands, thumps a fist into his own chest so hard it echoes in the night. And does that make him a villain or a hero, Jennet wonders, dazed. Silence jams in her ears, loud, sizzling. It is broken only by wrenching, horrid sobs. Liam is curled on the grass, face against the dirt, shuddering, shivering, racked. I am a monster, he moans. I hate myself, and I hate her, and it's not fair. I did no wrong, Jennet. I only fell asleep in a fairy circle. I didn't mean to. How was I to know that the Frey loved children so much? A frozen horror stabs into Jenn's joints. Ghastly disgust and understand pull at her guts, and she swallows hard on the urge to vomit. What do they do to the children they take? Liam only sobs harder. Ask me not, oh, he weeps. Jenn stands outside of the circle they currently occupy. She watches the candle burn low, the stars wheel overhead. Slowly Liam's sobs go quiet. Then still. He is limp with exhaustion, cradling his head, moaning and shivering in the damp of the grass and the chill of the night. As he's been weeping, atoning for his sins, Jennet has been thinking. She is the daughter of Margaret, who stole Tam Lin once. It can be done again. So when the candle is nothing more than a puddle of wax and a tenuous flame, she reaches out and pulls Liam's head onto her lap. She threads her fingers through his golden hair, dries his tears from his freckled cheeks, and asks, "How do you summon a Fey Queen?" "Jennet, no!" he says, jerking upright. "Tell me, or I'll find a way to do it myself, and I'm certain I'll do something wrong. So, Tam Lin of legend, tell me how to summon a Fey Queen." "You need merely ask," a deep and melodious voice says from somewhere just outside of the circle. It is accompanied by an uncomfortably chill breeze and the scent of nightshade. Her voice is devoid of all accent, flat and unnatural, and all warmth as well. Liam buries his head in Jennet's lap and moans in fear. "Ah, my Tamerlane," the Queen croons. "My Tamerlane," Jennet corrects, straining to meet the Queen's gaze against the dark of the night, but her skin is obsidian and her eyes are white fire, and though Jennet raises her chin in defiance, she cannot meet the Queen square. "I have heard that from one like you before. I shall assume that my wee man means to attempt to escape me in the arms of a mortal woman again." "No," Jennet says. "This time it's I who defies you, and I think this means that I'm the one to bargain with you." The Queen laughs, and Liam scrambles into Jennet's embrace, holding her tight, pressing the bridge of his nose under her ear and whimpering. "No, don't, my sweeting. Say nothing." Jennet pets the back of his head, cleaves to him, clings, and whispers back, "This princess has chosen her husband. Now let her lay the path for rescue. Hush." She looks up at the Queen. "I understand your preoccupation with him, your majesty," Jennet says aloud, infusing her voice with as much coolness as she is able. "He's so beautiful when he weeps, his skin pink so prettily." Liam whimpers, and Jennet forces an indulgent laugh at the sounds. "He is a kitten. I will trade you for him." "What can you have that I would want?" the Fey Queen asks. "My children," Jennet offers, voice low and emotionless as she can make it. She bites the inside of her cheek hard to keep it from quivering, to maintain her bluff. "And my children's children." "If they are of Caterhaugh blood, they are already mine," the Queen sneers. "Ah, but only on the tithing. I offer you this, all the children of my womb. As soon as they are born, they are yours, changelings for your court." The white fire in the Queen's face burns brighter. "You would give me this, all your children." "I offer you all the children of my womb as soon as they are free of it," Jennet agrees, "in return for Tam Lin's mortality. I want him human again and free of your geas. He will begin to age again, slowly, naturally, and you will have no claim to him, nor any resident or visitor of Caterhaugh for your tithing again." "Done! Done!" the Fey Queen cries. "Take your husband, human woman, and I will see you in 9 months for the first of my prizes." The breeze flutters again, the snuffling puddle of candle goes out, and slowly, all around them, the birds and the insects of the night resume their careful, cautious humming. Liam looks up from her lap and stares at Jennet in awe. "You—" he begins, but Jennet kisses him quiet. "Not in the circle," she says, and they help each other stand, legs numb from the dew and the cold. As the sun rises bloody and orange, they pick their way back to Caterhaugh Manor. They share a bubble bath, and when he combs the long strands of his hair out of his eyes, quiet and numb, Liam gives a cry and scrabbles at his head. "What is it?" Jennet asks. "A grey hair!" He turns in the tub, looking up into her face, and holds her tight, water-slick skin flush against hers. "Jenn! Grey! I'm free! Oh, my hero! My lover! Marry me!" he crows. "Take your prize! You've saved your damsel!" "On 2 conditions," Jennet says, kissing his giggles into her own mouth. "First, tell me you love me for me, not for what is or isn't inside me." "Jennet! My Jennet!" he whispers and smears kisses and promises against her neck. You saved me, and I am yours. Forever, I love you. Jennet grins, a smile curling on her face to match the stretch of scar on her stomach. "And the second, do you think your Fey Queen knows what a hysterectomy is?" "No, Liam," Tam Lin says. "So let's go to bed and get a start on making that first child for her. Earnest effort will have to go into the endeavor." "It's a deal," Jennet says, and takes him by the hand and leads him out of the waters of the bath and into life. Glorious, wonderful, messy life. The end. That was Another 4-Letter Word from Hero is a 4-Letter Word by J.M. Frey. Read by J.M. Frey. You can find more of my work at www.jmfrey.net.